Long before stadiums became digital theaters and football stars turned into virtual icons, the story of modern football gaming quietly began in small development rooms, late-night coding sessions, and experimental projects inside Konami studios. In the early 1990s, when football video games were still simple and limited by hardware, Konami started shaping a new vision. Instead of focusing only on arcade-style action, they aimed to recreate the rhythm, movement, and emotion of real football. This vision slowly took form with the release of Winning 11 in 1995 for the PlayStation. In Japan, the game was known for its realistic passing, tactical depth, and surprisingly smooth animations. While many players in the West were unaware of its existence, Winning 11 quietly built a loyal following in Asia. Soon after, the series expanded through titles like Goldstorm and its sequel, which introduced improved physics, more responsive controls, and better player movement. These early games did not rely on flashy presentation. Instead, they focused on how the ball felt when passed, how defenders reacted, and how attacks slowly developed. In Europe, the franchise became known through ISS Pro, released under the name International Superstar Soccer Pro. For many players, this was their first encounter with Konami's football philosophy. Compared to competitors, ISS Pro felt heavier, more deliberate, and more strategic. Matches were slower. Passes required precision. Positioning mattered. These elements created a sense of realism that was rare at the time. With ISS Pro Evolution, Konami refined this formula further. Animations became smoother, crowd sounds more immersive, and player behaviors more intelligent. The game no longer felt like a simple sports product. It began to feel like a simulation of real football moments. During this period, licenses were limited. Team names were often fictional. Player names were sometimes altered. Logos were simplified, yet players did not mind. What mattered was how the game played, not how it looked on paper. In bedrooms, living rooms, and small gaming shops, players discovered a new way to experience football. Friends gathered around CRT televisions. Controllers were passed from hand to hand. Rivalries were born quietly, match by match. There were no online modes, no leaderboards, no updates. Only memory cards, local tournaments, and personal pride. Developers worked with limited technology, yet they managed to create something emotionally lasting. Physics engines were handcrafted. Animations were manually tuned. Every movement was carefully tested. The early Winning 11 and ISS Pro titles laid the foundation for everything that followed. They established the importance of balance, realism, and player agency. They taught players to read the field, anticipate movement, and appreciate subtle details. More importantly, they created habits. Late-night matches, silent concentration, gentle controller clicks, soft menu music. These moments shaped an entire generation of football gamers. By the year 2000, Konami had quietly built one of the most respected football franchises in the world, even before the name PES officially became global, without noise, without hype, without pressure, only through consistency, patience, and love for the game. This was the calm beginning of a long journey that would later transform into Pro Evolution Soccer and eventually eFootball. And it all started here, in silence, in simplicity, in passion. As the new millennium began, football gaming entered a transformative era, and Konami's quiet dedication slowly turned into global recognition through a series of releases that would later be remembered as the golden age of Pro Evolution Soccer. With the arrival of Pro Evolution Soccer 3, the franchise reached a new level of technical maturity, introducing more refined animations, smarter artificial intelligence, and a deeper sense of tactical realism that encouraged players to think carefully before every pass, shot, and defensive move. For the first time, matches felt less like scripted simulations and more like organic football experiences, where momentum could shift naturally and individual decisions truly mattered. This foundation was expanded further with Pro Evolution Soccer 4, which brought official league licenses, improved commentary, and enhanced crowd atmosphere, creating stadium environments that felt alive even during quiet moments of possession. Players began spending hours learning team formations, experimenting with strategies, and slowly developing their own play styles, often influenced by real-world football philosophies. The release of Pro Evolution Soccer 5 marked a turning point, as online multiplayer functionality introduced a new dimension of competition, allowing players from different cities and countries to connect, compete, and form rivalries without ever meeting in person. For many, this was their first experience of digital football as a shared global space, where reputation, skill, and consistency mattered more than local bragging rights. However, it was Pro Evolution Soccer 6 that ultimately became the emotional centerpiece of the entire era, earning legendary status among fans and continuing to be played long after newer titles were released. PES 6 combined balanced gameplay, responsive controls, realistic ball physics, and a highly polished Master League mode, creating an environment where players could build teams, manage careers, and form long-term emotional attachments to virtual squads. In bedrooms, internet cafes, and student apartments, controllers passed between friends as tournaments unfolded quietly throughout the night, accompanied by soft menu music and the subtle hum of aging PlayStation consoles. Internet cafes became cultural centers where friendships were strengthened through late-night matches, handwritten brackets, and improvised trophies, turning digital competition into social ritual. Master League, in particular, became a personal journey for many players, as unknown players were developed into stars, struggling teams were rebuilt from the ground up, and fictional narratives emerged naturally through seasons of triumph and disappointment. Unlike modern sports games filled with microtransactions and seasonal resets, these PES titles encouraged patience, long-term planning, and emotional investment, rewarding dedication rather than impulsive spending. Technologically, this era represented the peak of PlayStation 2 development, where developers fully understood the hardware and optimized every detail, from player movement to stadium lighting and weather effects. Graphical limitations existed, yet artistic direction compensated through careful camera placement, realistic animations, and subtle visual storytelling. More importantly, these games created routines, after-school matches, weekend tournaments, midnight leagues. But rather than being rushed or chaotic, these routines became calming rituals that provided structure, familiarity, and comfort. Players learned to recognize stadium sounds, referee patterns, and player tendencies, creating an intimate relationship with the digital environment. During this golden age, PES was not merely a football game. It became a shared language among friends, classmates, and strangers, connecting people through common memories and experiences. By the end of 2006, Konami had established Pro Evolution Soccer as a cultural phenomenon, respected for its authenticity, depth, and emotional resonance. This period defined expectations for football games and shaped the identity of an entire generation of players. It was an era of balance between competition and relaxation, between skill and patience, between ambition and comfort. And for many, it remains the standard against which all future football games are measured. After the emotional peak of Pro Evolution Soccer 6, expectations surrounding the franchise became heavier, and the football gaming landscape began shifting rapidly as new hardware, online infrastructure, and global competition reshaped the industry. With the transition to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, Konami entered a technically demanding era that required rebuilding core systems while preserving the realism and balance that had defined the golden age. Pro Evolution Soccer 2008 marked the beginning of this transition, introducing upgraded graphics, enhanced player models, and a redesigned animation system that aimed to capture more authentic body movement. However, adapting to new hardware proved challenging, and while the visuals improved, some longtime fans felt that the smooth gameplay rhythm of PES 6 had shifted. Despite early criticism, Konami continued refining its formula with Pro Evolution Soccer 2009, which introduced the official UEFA Champions League license, bringing one of football's most prestigious tournaments directly into the series. For many players, hearing the iconic Champions League anthem within a PES stadium created a powerful emotional connection that elevated the game beyond casual competition. The inclusion of structured online modes also became more prominent during this era. Players could now compete regularly through ranked matches and online leagues, transforming Pro Evolution Soccer into a persistent competitive environment rather than a purely local experience. With Pro Evolution Soccer 2010, Konami improved tactical customization, allowing players to fine-tune team strategies with greater precision. Formations became more flexible, defensive lines could be adjusted, and attacking patterns could be programmed in subtle ways that rewarded thoughtful preparation. The release of Pro Evolution Soccer 2011 is often remembered as a technical and creative refinement. This installment introduced a more manual passing system and greater player control, which increased the skill ceiling and demanded patience from its audience. Matches felt deliberate and measured, encouraging careful build-up rather than rushed attacks. Although FIFA's popularity was steadily rising during this period, PES maintained a dedicated community that valued gameplay depth over presentation spectacle. Discussions on online forums centered around ball physics, defensive positioning, and tactical experimentation rather than cosmetic features. By the time Pro Evolution Soccer 2012 was released, Konami had stabilized much of the technical turbulence caused by the hardware transition. Player movement felt more natural, off-ball runs became smarter, and the overall pacing returned closer to the balanced tempo that fans remembered. However, the competitive pressure from EA Sports intensified each year, particularly in terms of licensing agreements and broadcast-style presentation. While FIFA secured exclusive partnerships with major leagues and teams, PES relied more heavily on gameplay authenticity and community loyalty. During these years, online competition quietly changed the emotional tone of the series. Local multiplayer sessions slowly decreased as online rankings, seasonal events, and digital rivalries became the new norm. Victory was no longer shared in the same room, but across servers and distant time zones. Despite this shift, the essence of PES remained rooted in thoughtful football. Players still valued possession, spacing, and timing. The rhythm of matches encouraged calm decision-making rather than chaotic button pressing. The expansion era represented both growth and uncertainty. It was a time when the franchise tested new systems, navigated criticism, and adapted to technological change while attempting to preserve its identity. It was not as universally celebrated as the Golden Age, yet it played a crucial role in shaping the modern direction of the series. Between nostalgia and innovation, Pro Evolution Soccer continued moving forward, quietly redefining itself in a rapidly evolving digital world. By 2013, the balance between nostalgia and innovation had become increasingly fragile for Pro Evolution Soccer, as technological ambition and rising competition began testing the foundation that had once felt unshakable. Pro Evolution Soccer 2013 is often remembered as the final echo of the traditional PES formula, preserving much of the fluid ball control, responsive dribbling, and tactical depth that longtime fans associated with the series. Many players saw it as a spiritual continuation of the golden era, even as the industry around it was changing rapidly. However, the transition to a new engine marked a dramatic turning point. With Pro Evolution Soccer 2014, Konami introduced the Fox engine to the franchise, aiming to modernize graphics, animations, and environmental detail. While the ambition was clear, the execution proved unstable. Performance issues, inconsistent gameplay physics, and animation irregularities created frustration among players who had grown accustomed to the precision and balance of earlier titles. For the first time in many years, confidence in the series felt uncertain. Online discussions became more critical. Comparisons with FIFA intensified. Players who once defended PES passionately began questioning its direction. Yet Konami did not retreat. With Pro Evolution Soccer 2015, the development team focused on stabilizing gameplay mechanics and restoring fluidity to player movement. The core football philosophy, patient build-up, realistic ball weight, and strategic positioning slowly began resurfacing. The true recovery moment arrived with Pro Evolution Soccer 2016, widely praised for its balanced gameplay, improved AI responsiveness, and refined defensive mechanics. Many fans viewed PES 2016 as a redemption chapter, proving that the franchise still possessed creative resilience despite earlier turbulence. The following installment, Pro Evolution Soccer 2017, continued this upward momentum by enhancing first-touch realism, contextual animations, and tactical fluidity. Although FIFA's dominance in licensing and presentation continued expanding globally, PES quietly rebuilt trust through gameplay authenticity. During these years, the emotional tone of the community shifted noticeably. Where earlier eras had been defined by pure enthusiasm, this period was characterized by cautious optimism. Players still gathered for local matches, but the atmosphere was more reflective. Discussions centered around patch updates, balance adjustments, and hopes for long-term stability. Financial models within sports gaming were also evolving. Microtransactions and card-based team-building modes gained popularity across the industry, subtly altering player expectations and engagement habits. PES began experimenting more visibly with MyClub systems, acknowledging the shifting economics of modern gaming. Despite setbacks, one constant remained: the distinct rhythm of PES football. Matches continued to reward patience, structured defense, and thoughtful possession rather than frantic speed. In a rapidly commercializing market, Pro Evolution Soccer struggled not because it lacked identity, but because it was trying to preserve one while adapting to new technological realities. The struggle years were not defined by failure alone. They were defined by experimentation, humility, and persistence. This was the era when PES learned that survival in modern gaming required flexibility without losing its soul. And in that quiet struggle, the foundation for its next transformation was slowly forming. After years of turbulence and cautious rebuilding, Pro Evolution Soccer entered a quieter but more focused phase between 2018 and 2021, during which the development team appeared determined to restore gameplay credibility while preparing for a structural transformation that would eventually redefine the franchise. Pro Evolution Soccer 2018 marked a subtle yet meaningful recovery, emphasizing improved ball physics, enhanced player individuality, and smoother animation blending that allowed matches to feel more organic and less mechanically rigid. Although the series still struggled in global market share compared to its primary competitor, many dedicated players quietly acknowledged that the core football experience had regained stability. With Pro Evolution Soccer 2019, visual fidelity advanced further through refined lighting systems and more realistic stadium environments, while gameplay balance leaned heavily into controlled tempo and thoughtful build-up. Tactical awareness once again became central, and patient possession play was rewarded in ways that reminded longtime fans of earlier eras. The partnership strategy during this period also shifted noticeably. Instead of chasing widespread licensing battles, Konami focused on exclusive agreements with select clubs, such as FC Barcelona and Bayern Munich, creating detailed player likenesses and authentic stadium recreations that emphasized quality over quantity. eFootball PES 2020 introduced Lionel Messi as a central ambassador figure and further refined dribbling systems, implementing contextual first-touch mechanics that gave players a stronger sense of control in tight spaces. Matches felt heavier in a deliberate way, encouraging rhythm rather than speed, and defensive positioning regained strategic importance. By the time eFootball PES 2021 season update was released, the franchise had reached an unusual crossroads. Rather than presenting a full new installment, Konami chose to release a seasonal update built upon the PES 2020 foundation, signaling that larger structural changes were being prepared behind the scenes. This decision was both practical and symbolic. It acknowledged limited development resources while quietly preparing players for a shift toward a new identity. Meanwhile, MyClub systems evolved further, blending traditional team management with card-based progression models that mirrored industry trends. While some fans appreciated expanded customization, others remained nostalgic for simpler Master League journeys unburdened by monetization layers. Technologically, the gaming landscape was shifting toward cross-platform connectivity, live service structures, and free-to-play accessibility. Pro Evolution Soccer stood at the edge of this transformation, balancing its historical identity with modern economic realities. During these years, the emotional atmosphere around the franchise felt calmer but uncertain. Matches were enjoyable, gameplay was stable, and loyal communities persisted. Yet there was a growing awareness that something fundamental was about to change. The brand name itself began evolving. The gradual emphasis on the eFootball identity hinted at a redefinition that extended beyond annual releases. In retrospect, this era can be understood as a quiet preparation period. The developers refined what still worked, stabilized gameplay mechanics, and slowly reoriented the franchise toward a new distribution model. It was not a dramatic revolution, but a careful repositioning. A final deep breath before transformation. And with that breath, Pro Evolution Soccer approached the most significant shift in its history. By 2021, the identity of Pro Evolution Soccer stood at the edge of its most dramatic transformation, as Konami officially announced that the long-running annual series would be replaced by a new platform built under a different philosophy and a different name. The release of eFootball PES 2021 season update had already hinted at structural change, but the full rebranding arrived with eFootball 2022, a free-to-play title designed to unify console, PC, and mobile ecosystems under a single live service model. This was not merely a new installment. It was the end of the traditional PES cycle. For decades, players had anticipated yearly releases, incremental improvements, and seasonal resets. Now, that rhythm was replaced by a persistent platform intended to evolve continuously through updates rather than discrete annual versions. The ambition behind eFootball 2022 was significant. Built on Unreal Engine, the game promised enhanced realism, cross-platform play, and a modernized football experience accessible to a global audience. However, the launch proved deeply unstable. Technical issues, graphical inconsistencies, animation glitches, and limited content availability quickly dominated public discourse. Early reviews were harsh, and social media amplified visual bugs that became symbolic of the troubled debut. For many longtime supporters, the emotional reaction was not anger alone, but confusion and disappointment. The franchise that had once defined thoughtful football simulation now seemed uncertain in its execution. Yet beneath the turbulence, structural change was unfolding. Konami's decision to adopt a free-to-play model reflected broader industry movements toward accessibility and long-term monetization structures. Instead of selling yearly boxed copies, the company aimed to build a constantly evolving ecosystem supported by in-game purchases and seasonal updates. Over time, patches addressed gameplay responsiveness, defensive AI behavior, and visual polish. Stability gradually improved. Player animations became more fluid. Match flow regained structure. Still, the absence of certain traditional modes, most notably Master League, remained a lingering source of dissatisfaction among core fans. The transformation was not simply technical, it was philosophical. Pro Evolution Soccer had been a product released annually. eFootball was positioned as a service, an evolving environment rather than a finite package. During this transition, the emotional landscape of the community shifted again. Some players departed permanently, unwilling to adapt to the new direction. Others remained, cautiously observing each update and waiting for the platform to mature. The early years of eFootball were marked by patience rather than excitement, quiet downloads, careful testing, measured optimism. Although the initial launch represented one of the most difficult moments in the franchise's history, it also forced Konami to confront long-standing structural limitations and reimagine its distribution strategy. In retrospect, this period can be understood as a collapse followed by reconstruction. Not the end of football gaming within Konami Studios, but the dismantling of one identity to build another. The name PES slowly faded from storefronts, replaced by eFootball, signaling that the series had crossed a point of no return. Whether this reinvention would ultimately succeed remained uncertain. But the journey forward had already begun. As eFootball continues evolving through seasonal updates and gradual refinements, the broader story of Pro Evolution Soccer no longer feels like a simple timeline of releases, but rather a reflection of how digital football has grown alongside its players over 3 decades. What began in the mid-1990s as Winning 11 quietly experimenting with realistic movement eventually transformed into a globally recognized franchise under the Pro Evolution Soccer name, and later into the modern live service platform known as eFootball. Yet beyond branding changes and engine transitions, something deeper has remained constant. The rhythm of controlled possession, the satisfaction of a well-timed through ball, and the calm concentration required to build and attack patiently from the back. Today, eFootball operates within a very different ecosystem compared to the PlayStation 2 era. Cross-platform connectivity links console and mobile players. Regular content updates replace annual disc launches. Monetization structures reflect modern gaming economics. The environment is faster, more connected, and more commercially complex. However, beneath these structural differences, the essence of digital football still depends on subtle timing and spatial awareness. Even in its newest form, the game continues rewarding measured build-up, intelligent positioning, and thoughtful decision-making rather than chaotic speed. The long-awaited return of traditional modes such as Master League has become a recurring topic within the community, symbolizing a desire not only for gameplay features, but for emotional continuity with the past. Players are not merely asking for mechanics. They are asking for familiarity. In many ways, the future of eFootball will likely depend on its ability to balance accessibility with depth. Free-to-play entry points attract new audiences, yet long-term engagement still relies on meaningful progression systems and authentic football dynamics. Artificial intelligence will continue improving. Player animations will become more fluid. Stadium atmospheres will grow increasingly immersive. Yet technological advancement alone will not define success. What defines this franchise is memory. The quiet nights of local tournaments, the slow rebuild of a struggling Master League club, a careful adjustment of tactics before kickoff. These experiences transcend engine updates and platform shifts. For longtime players, PES is not only a game. It is a chapter of adolescence, friendship, and routine. For newer players discovering eFootball for the first time, it may represent a starting point rather than a continuation. The bridge between these generations will determine how the series is remembered decades from now. If eFootball can integrate its historical identity with modern service design, it may redefine digital football once again. If not, it will remain a reminder of how ambitious transformation can reshape even the most established brands. Either way, the journey from Winning 11 to eFootball stands as one of the most distinctive evolutions in sports gaming history. From memory cards to cloud servers, from local rivalries to global matchmaking, from silence to streaming platforms. The name has changed, the structure has changed, but the quiet rhythm of virtual football, played thoughtfully and patiently, continues. And somewhere, in a dimly lit room, a controller is still being held carefully as another match begins.